And now we begin the fun part. So far, we've been doing all kinds of boring work to get just to a very, very basic scene, but I hope that by now we're pretty excited about the possibilities and we're ready to get started working. And one of the first things that I think that every aspiring moto artist should do is create a variety of preset materials that they can use all the time for all kinds of different projects. Now, I have a particular way that I like to do that, but you can do this in a million different ways. I'm going to give you one way that I think is pretty flexible, but then you can use what you learn in this series to create whatever library makes sense for you. Now, the way that I work with these things is you can see here I have a materials folder that I call my base materials, and these all start from a neutral middle gray. Everything here is a neutral middle gray. I have a bunch of base materials up top that are really, really basic, just may or may not be a little bit reflective. Then I have a bunch of kind of chromy metallic materials of various intensities. Then I have some clear coat materials that look maybe kind of like car paint. And then finally down here I have some metallic base materials that are more like sandblasted aluminum or something like that with various levels of polish on them. And from there I can then go ahead and build up a material. So for example, let's say I want to build a material based on this glossy material here. So I take a basic gloss material, I'm going to drag it into my sphere group, and suddenly this thing turns glossy, and I have some presets that look pretty good with this given light setup, right? So now I can go back to my parent directory here, and now let's look at some of these other options. I have my base material set. Now I can grab a color. So for example, in my color checker colors, I have an already gamma corrected blue sky color. I could just drag out here and drop right above that material, and you can see it changes it to that color. I've just added a diffuse color layer on top of that base material, but the base material properties are still the same as they used to be. I just now have a color on top of them. You can imagine adding common Pantone colors and things like that. And these can be added to any one of your base materials. And then on top of that, let's say I want a texture. Well, I have some material textures assigned here, and I use special kind of close-up icons for those. Let's say I want kind of a medium texture. I have one called medium here. Just drag that out and drop it on top. And that's going to add a bump material. So right now this noise layer is set to bump mode, and it's going to gradually create a very kind of fine grain bump on my surface. And one other thing to notice is that the noise layer that I've created here, notice that it is set to 15% opacity, not 100%. I saved that into my preset. And the reason for that is because this base material, all of my base materials, if we look at their bump amplitude, I've always got those set to a consistent value. In my case, I like to set them to 1 millimeter, which is way too deep for the vast majority of bump maps, but it will give me the headroom I need if I did want to create a really severe bump texture. But then I can very easily grab a noise layer and just turn its opacity down. So essentially what I've done here is by taking this noise layer and turning it down to 15% opacity, I've now set this to 150 micrometers in depth, which is exactly what I want for this texture. So this is a way that I can use essentially stock components to build up materials of various colors, finishes, textures really quickly, really easily, without a whole lot of fuss. All right, so let's take a look at how to set up a system like this.